We'll just wait here for the waiting room to clear up a little bit. All right, so hi everybody. It's now 4 o'clock, so we will begin. And I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to launch our new webinar series for 2023. And this is being recorded, so if anybody has to step out at any point, we will be able to share the recording afterwards and it will be available on our website. So welcome everyone to the Canadian Society of Organic Land Care, or SOLS, National Webinar Series for 2023. For now, I would like to ask everybody to please mute themselves. I'm Kristen Knoll, the new Executive Director of SOL, and I'm happy to be your host for this event. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from Nova Scotia in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. It would be wonderful to see where all of you are joining us from, so I invite you to do that in the chat box now. We can't do our work without support, and we gratefully acknowledge support from Gaia College, the leading school for organic land care professional development and diploma courses. SOL's membership includes accredited professionals, and SOL also welcomes public memberships who wish to support ecological and holistic land care. So if you're not a member, please consider joining, and note that organic land care is the only accepted standard in Canada, and the SOL standard, which outlines principles, practices, and products, is available for free on our website, and I will put the link in the chat later. And all SOL accredited practitioners follow this standard. So this is our first episode of our 2023 series, and we have episodes scheduled every 2 weeks on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every month, we feature a theme that impacts our work, and March and April's theme is biologically diverse food forests and community gardens. You can find a full schedule of the webinars for the rest of the year on SOL's website. Make sure to register. At the end of the talk, we will open the floor for a question period when the speaker has done their presentation. You may ask questions via the chat during or after the presentation, or by unmuting yourself and asking the question directly. However, we ask that this only happens during the question period. This is a great opportunity to connect and share knowledge. Together, we can make more of an impact than working on our own. And so please don't hesitate to ask any questions. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Carrie Regenstreif from Delki Dozzi. Launched in 2017, this community food forest is a green space located in a Sudbury city park created by Shared Harvest with support from reThink Green. The food forest includes fruit trees, shrubs, living ground covers, and other perennial edible plants that provide food for humans, insects, birds, and mammals. Everyone is welcome to help themselves to food forest products. About 30 to 40 volunteers contribute to the maintenance of the space each year. Shared Harvest offers food forest tours, workshops, and other educational activities to inspire new people to care for green spaces. So with that, take it away, Carrie.
Hi. So Sudbury Shared Harvest, first of all, is a nonprofit organization and a charitable organization, registered charity. We do a number of different urban agriculture projects around the city of Sudbury, but today, of course, I will focus on the one that is in the Greener Green Spaces program, the Delki Dozzi Food Forest, and I'll talk briefly towards the end about some of our other food forest related, other smaller ones around the city that we've been working on now. Whoops, why is it not scrolling? Sorry. There we go. So the Delki Food Forest, I guess I'll start at the very beginning. Sudbury Shared Harvest started actually as a food rescue organization, not fruit rescue, more like from people's yards. So people who had extra apples or even vegetables in their backyard, we would collect it and redistribute it to food programs. And then in 2015, that kind of led into working with the Community Garden Network in Sudbury on a fruit tree project. We got a grant to plant just fruit trees. At that time, I had never even heard of a food forest. So this was to plant some cold hardy cherry, plum, and apple trees in about 15 different food forests around the city. And 15 different community gardens in municipal parks and so on. And so then it was probably just a few months later when the Beacon Food Forest started passing it just kept coming up on my Facebook feed. And it's this, if you haven't heard of it, it's in Seattle, Washington. It's huge. I believe it's about 7 acres now. And it's one of the first food forests, or maybe the biggest one in the United States, but it was getting a lot of publicity at that time. And I just thought, oh, wow, this is amazing. I mean, I had only just learned that you could grow different kinds of fruit trees besides apples in Sudbury. And so I thought, maybe, I wonder if we could do something like that. So I, of course, started researching on the internet and, are there any in Northern Ontario or Ontario? And I came across Bonita Ford's website. I've listed the website there. She is based in Perth, Ontario. And at that time, her and her partner had maybe 7 or 8 or even 10 years earlier had started a food forest on their own property in Perth. But then she had also been involved with nonprofit organizations in Ottawa and Perth and also in Thunder Bay to do food forest projects there. And I should say that I started out with almost no gardening experience. I am not a gardener. I actually have failed rhubarb 3 times in my life. That's a true story that I won't go into. So my first instinct was find somebody who knows what they're doing to lead us through this process. So, and what I did have experience with is getting grants and managing nonprofit projects. So my first thing was to start trying to get a grant. I talked to Bonita. I found out, how much would it cost for us to bring her to Sudbury and help us kind of make this happen. And so, that started early 2016. I guess I put the word out there in the community and said, let's have a meeting, and about between 20 and 25 people showed up for the first meeting, and about 7 or 8 of those became part of the long-term planning committee. And so we started, I guess the first order of business was find a location and start talking to the city, asking whether we could go and do this in various locations that we had in mind. And it did take 4 or 5 months. If anyone's ever worked with the municipality, there was lots of back and forth, and they didn't like some of the ideas we first put forward for locations. And we went back and forth and went on a little tour once spring came and saw some different places they were suggesting, and eventually settled on Delki Dozzi. And so Delki Dozzi Park is a fairly big park. It's fairly central in Sudbury, and had some advantages in being a very busy park with lots of sports fields and playgrounds and ice rinks and so on, but also had a very active community garden group already that grew vegetables. It's just outside of this picture you see on the top. That's our sort of before picture. But you do see these, this was taken in the fall of 2016, that there were about 6 apple and a couple, 2 or 3 cherry trees that had been planted by the community garden folks over the previous few years. And so that was a good base. We could, they were just kind of on their own, and they weren't really being that well maintained, to be honest. So it was a way to get, something growing around them and probably give them a better chance. Once we had a location, we did have a public consultation process. We had an online survey so people could give input. We had a public meeting for people to give input. And once it was, completely decided, and in the meantime, I had managed to get a grant to bring Bonita Ford to Sudbury in the fall of 2016. And the pictures you see on the bottom, on the left, is the workshop. So she gave a presentation and also a hands-on workshop, and we've sort of used this as a model throughout of how we do volunteering. We try to really make it an educational experience. It's not just come and give you something to do, dig this hole. It's sort of about, this is why we're doing this, and here's some information you can take home with you, and all of that kind of thing. So that workshop, what we did was one of those fruit trees that I mentioned in the parks that were planted in 2015, this one that you see here on the left, on the right, on the bottom is at Twin Forks Playground. And that was one of the apple trees that had been planted there the year before. And we just did what is called a fruit tree guild around that. So she taught us about just choosing some plants to go about 10 feet by 10 feet around that apple tree. I think the picture is actually taken probably the next year. So that was sort of give people a chance to see what it's all about, get more people interested in preparation for sort of the following fall, or sorry, there was further planning that went on throughout the year. So from that fall through the winter, we met monthly with Bonita. It was my first experience on Zoom, most people's first experience on Zoom that year. We met, she was back in Perth, and we met with her approximately monthly, the 7 or 8 people. She led us through all the questions we needed to ask and all the things we needed to think about, and just getting ready for planting in the spring. And just on the top, very top corner there, what you see is a screenshot of a small part of what was the original long list was about 300 plants. So there was also a smaller subcommittee of people, about 3 or 4 people who just wanted to discuss plants and which plants we should choose. And so they each started, they came with either experience in fruit tree care, fruit tree growing in one case, and just gardening in general, but didn't know a lot about food forest gardening and wanted to learn more. And so they kind of started with a huge list of kind of a wish list, and then kind of went through and decided, trying to choose as many native plants as possible, trying to choose things that would be readily available in Sudbury, that would grow well, and that were known to grow well in Sudbury, talking to other gardeners, et cetera, et cetera. And what they got was this, you see at the bottom of the arrow is what's now on our website, if you're interested in seeing the short list of what we ended up deciding on and what's more or less there today. And, short descriptions of the plants, and in some cases reasoning for why we've included them. And then the other photo you see there, the plan is really one of many, many drafts of the sort of floor plan of the the landscape plan for the food forest. It is about 8,000 square feet in total, and that was done over 2 years in 2 phases. And just, that plan, of course, was not followed exactly. The planting happened in 2 phases in the spring of 2017 and 2018. And, using that overall plan, and Bonita coming back to Sudbury in the spring of 2017 to kind of lead us on our first big planting day. And again, as an educational workshop weekend, this is how we organized it. And we also involved some school groups in doing some of the activities in the planting. And we try to do that. We've been trying to involve more schools in different aspects of this, and continue to try to do that when we can. So once it was planted, one of the first things I remember reading about food forests was that they were low maintenance. And I even remember, I think, kind of having it in my head, whether someone had told me that or I just imagined it, that they could be no maintenance. And I think you could do a no maintenance food forest if you, if you were living somewhere where your neighbors weren't going to be bothered, and it's your own property, you could plant it and not do any maintenance, I suppose, on it, and just see what happens, and you'd probably get some food. But partly because we are in city parks, and partly because we want to, maximize the amount of actual things that we intend to grow, as opposed to things that, you can call them weeds or unintended plants. We do a fair bit of maintenance. We have weekly work bees at Delki Dozzi, and we tried a few different models of recruiting volunteers, and this seems to be the one that's working the best, is to just leave it very casual. People don't have to commit to anything in particular. They can just drop in 1 week, learn a little bit about it, and we'll put them to work. And so that seems to be working quite well. But we also do have summer students every year with the Canada Summer Jobs Program, and that really helps to make sure that we're keeping things in order, at least looking decent. And so now that things are growing, as it was mentioned in the introduction, the food is there for anyone to help themselves. You don't have to participate in any kind of maintenance or any kind of work to help yourself to whatever you can find growing there. And then we do also try as much as possible to offer workshops and learning experiences for people on various topics to help use the area and sort of spread more knowledge about, so that people can take home and try to do something like this at home on a smaller scale. It really is a big part of it. I think a lot of people think about it as something that's going to, help feed people. And while we would love it if, we were able to make a dent in hunger, that's not really the main purpose. I mean, we not directly, it's more about giving people tools to go and grow their own food, than expecting that we're going to be able to feed a whole lot of people through the produce of the garden. Just a few pictures of the signage. So another grant, of course, we were able to actually hire the same artist who had done beautiful signs for the Beacon Food Forest in Seattle. I thought they were so beautiful that I wanted to. She used more or less the same images, but she had to make some changes because of different plants that were mentioned specifically that we didn't have, and so on, or to include different ones that we use. And then as well on the right, you see, we also have plant markers, not on every plant, but as much as possible to, if people are just walking through on their own, to be able to identify what things are. I don't know if you could see it on the far left there of that right picture is it's asparagus patch. And those are just handmade from, scrap wood and leftover paints and things like that. And but are really nice for people to just do a little tour on their own. Just another picture, you might remember the November 2016 before picture. And just to give you an idea of overall what things look like, we have millions of photos, so I won't show you millions, but I will show you some more photos of kind of individual types of things that we have growing there in a minute. But just to give you an idea of the sort of like the dramatic change that what it looks like now. We have been trying to really add more native wildflowers as they become available. When we started out, it was really hard to source a lot of native wildflowers in Sudbury, and it's still difficult, but as we've started asking for them and other community groups are interested and individuals now asking for more native wildflowers, more things are becoming easier to either order or just to get. And so we're adding those, although we otherwise are not adding a lot of new plants to the Delki Dozzi Food Forest each year. Just a few other, just some photos of what we have: gooseberries, aronia or chokeberry, not to be confused with choke cherry. It's often people confuse it, but not by how it looks, but just the name. Then there's some things that are not edible. There are other reasons why we've planted them. For example, this is blue false indigo. This is a nitrogen fixer, so enriching the soil. It's kind of like a natural fertilizer, and very pretty flowers as well. Comfrey, if anyone's ever grown comfrey, you'll know that it's very prolific. These are all started as little tiny plants, and they grow to, I don't know, sometimes 4 feet tall. And you can cut this down several times throughout the season, really every few weeks, and it will just keep growing back. So the benefit here is that comfrey has very deep roots and is what's called a dynamic accumulator. It can accumulate some minerals that you'll find very deep in the soil that other plants are not able to access it will actually, pull them up, and they'll end up in these leaves that what we do is called chop and drop. We chop it throughout the season and drop it on the soil. So rather than removing it and putting it in a compost bin or somewhere else, we are leaving things that we chop down and letting them regenerate, and return those nutrients to the soil. But this one's particularly good for that because it grows so quickly. Raspberries, of course, everybody knows. Creeping thyme, we have a lot of this because, we can start with a little tiny plant or plant parts of it to another part and it spreads. And because we have such a large area, we're not worrying about it taking over. It's not taking over. It's just doing a nice job of covering a lot of ground, attracts bees, and yeah. Same with white clover, except that it's also a nitrogen fixer. So you can also chop it and drop it throughout the season, returning that nitrogen to the soil. And some people don't like the way it looks. It makes a great ground cover, and it's I think very pretty, and also attracts bees and so on. So lots of benefits to clover. Saskatchewan cold hardy cherry. A lot of people, including me, did not know before we started this that you could grow cherries at all in Sudbury. Not the kind you get in the grocery store, but some delicious cherries that are actually good just to eat without cooking or anything. And so, yeah, again, part of it is really just getting that message out to people of what we can grow in Sudbury, and that there's better possibilities than lawns in city parks. Apples, many varieties, again, cold hardy apples that are bred at the University of Saskatchewan. So we have many varieties that we have available to us, and that we've planted different ones. Just a quick bit about expanding to different parts of the city. We have originally, I guess, thought that there is an area next to the existing food forest at Delki Dozzi that we thought we might just continue to make it larger. Once we would try to see if people were getting involved and it was going well. But then people really started saying, what about this spot? What about that spot? Oh, we want to do it here and there. And so we decided instead to try to make a goal of planting at least one in each of Sudbury's political wards. So we have 12 city councillors, 12 wards. And so by 2026, we're well on our way to having at least one of these, much smaller. So we're not aiming at 8,000 square feet anymore. We're aiming at, well, the smallest one I'll show you in a minute, but somewhere in the below 1,000 square feet are most of these other ones. So a couple at high schools. We've worked with a number of different existing community garden groups. And just a quick thing about our most recent project, just because this is also our smallest project. So 250 square feet, 25 feet by 10 feet. It really started out because there was this, I don't know if you could see my arrow, but this is a cherry plum tree. So in that original 2015 project, there were 2 cherry plum trees planted at this Louis Street community garden. And they were really not in a very good spot. And they were actually shading they weren't actually producing fruit because they were too close together. And they were shading the vegetable garden. So the city had asked us if we could move them. And so we thought, well, if we're going to move them, let's make a little, edible forest garden around them, food forest. And so, as you can see, June of 2022, we were just putting it in. And a few months later, you can see it's already sort of rewarding to see things already growing. And there were kids enjoying strawberries all summer. They're the kind of day-neutral strawberries that produce more or less throughout the summer. And that's the cherry plum tree here that's already started to thrive in its new location. So anyways, I will not try to thank all of the many funders and supporters we've had over the years, But I do just want to recognize that the city of Greater Sudbury and also the federal government, through various funding programs, and in the city's case, also through some just cooperation with us, and providing wood chips and things like that, have been hugely supportive, and so really important. And also to just thank SOL once again, the Society for Urban Land Care, for inviting us and for making us part of the Green Space program. So that's it. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Carrie. That was a wonderful presentation. If anybody has any questions, you can plug them into the chat now, or you could raise your hand and unmute yourself to ask a question directly. So I don't see any yet, but I will start it off if that's okay with a question. I'm just curious, which aspects of your work have you found to be the most rewarding? So I know it must be great to see you've talked a lot about expansion, things like that, but I'm just wondering kind of what keeps you going with this meaningful work.
I think it's really the feedback we get. I mean, it's the people who are hearing about it for the first time, after 5 years or whatever, and get in touch. They see something on social media or in the media, and they've moved recently to Sudbury and say, oh, like this is, I'm just so excited this is happening. And, they come out to an event, and it's just to have that kind of, like, we really are constantly getting that type of just the positive feedback from the community of wanting to see more of it and people willing to get involved. Yeah. That's
great. What about conversely, I guess, would you be able to share some of the challenges or the barriers that you've run into over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say so. When we've expanded to other areas, it's become more and more clear. So, it's such a learning experience as you go along. I think that how I pictured things at the beginning versus how things have come. So that original committee of 7 people, the planning committee, there's not a single person on that planning committee who I still see regularly. The positive thing is that other people have come, but with the smaller gardens, I've really tried and again, it took a few to learn this, is to try to partner with groups that are very well established to begin with, and that are committed to taking care of them, because we can't take care of 12 gardens all on our own. Like, even with the volunteer involvement, there's still all the organizing of the volunteers. Like, not a lot of volunteers don't want to be that person who's there every week and sends an email to everyone and says, okay, we're going to meet up this time, or whatever it is. It's raining, we're going to skip this week. And so finding those groups that are willing to really take, because of the 8 gardens we have, there's about 4 or 5 that there's a group that's committed. Like, I don't have to worry, oh, we better make sure we have to do, whereas the other ones, we're still, as an organization, organizing, trying to, and always having different people showing up. Like, we're not kind of getting a person or two who are like, okay, this is our garden, we're going to make sure it gets maintained. So yeah, so the ongoing maintenance is a challenge, for sure. And yeah, I'm glad we realized pretty quickly Bonita was really, one of the first things she said to me was to kind of lower our expectations size-wise. Like, I had no idea really what an acre was or whatever. And I thought, I don't know, maybe we find an area in the city that's like an acre, and then we could grow into it. And she just sort of was like, whatever you're thinking, let's go smaller. You can always expand, but if you start too big. She'd had some experience with one of her community projects where, people had been very enthusiastic at the beginning and then just hadn't followed through on maintaining it. And there wasn't a group that was managing it, and it had gotten kind of out of hand.
Right. So I guess on that same note, I'm wondering if you were to give advice to somebody that was looking to start a community food forest or one of these like similar greener green spaces, what would your advice be to them? So if you could restart your whole journey over again, what is there anything that you would do differently? How would you get the wheels on the ground and turning to make sure that it happens? Like, yeah, if you had any advice, I think people would really appreciate
That's
it.
a really good question. I would start way smaller. Like, I love that we've managed to do it, but if we had started smaller with the Delki Dozzi one to begin with, it would have been better off. You can always then see if that area is managing to be maintained, then you could, expand. You can always add plants. But definitely, yeah, I would start small. I don't know if Bonita even does this kind of design coaching thing for other groups, but I think our method of getting a grant to hire her, and there's other people like that, someone who knows what they're doing to kind of lead you through the process, unless you know a lot about it to begin with, and have a really great group of people that have lots of knowledge. That really worked well for us, I thought.
Yeah, that's really great. Just some comments coming in through the chat. No questions, but a lot of people saying thank you for sharing your experience. Thanks for the great information, especially the gardens in the north of Ontario. So yeah, thank you very much. Another question that I was thinking about when you were kind of giving that advice to somebody that would be starting out is what would be your advice in terms of mobilizing volunteers or getting volunteers? So you alluded that it's really important to make sure that you have these stewards, but I guess, did you have any advice on how to make sure how do you create a network of volunteers that is doing this great work?
Yeah, it's I'm always amazed when I see other organizations that operate without staff. There are lots of volunteer organizations in various fields in Canada, that I've come across in various contexts that operate. And I think it's usually when I know a little bit more about it, there's usually a core, either one or two or three people who are very committed, people who are retired and have a lot of time and have decided that this is something they are going to do. Because my thing has been, before this, I had worked for another nonprofit organization for quite a few years, and I feel very strongly about like people should be paid to do like this. There's a lot of work involved in a lot of what are volunteer based projects, so we rely a lot on volunteer labor and volunteer involvement. But if there isn't somebody that's paid to make sure that continues to happen, I think it's very difficult. Like I said, if you have someone who has lots of time and is willing to spend a lot of time as a volunteer doing the organizational part, that's great. But I have, part of getting grants is continuing grants that can help to pay me so that I can continue to, organize things, get more grants to do all the other things. And so now I can't remember what the question was. Did I answer it?
Yeah, you did. It's just asking about how you mobilized volunteers, but yeah,
Okay.
I think that
Because
sums it up.
It's not a full-time job in itself, maybe, but it's definitely a lot of work to mobilize volunteers. So being out there on social media regularly and in the news media regularly, and posters, and going to other events. We do a lot of networking with the Community Garden Network and other garden related things and agriculture related things going on in Sudbury. So all of those things take time and help to build that network of people that are interested.
Great. No, that's wonderful. Are there any other questions from anybody in the audience? Christine, I see you have your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, no, I have a question related to the idea that the volunteer experience is also an educational experience. And I was just wondering if you could talk about what is imparted, what is the education, what are people learning and applying, and how do you figure out if they are transferring that to their home situation or another community group situation? How do you track that?
Right. Yeah, well, there's a few different elements of it. Like for the planting events, so it will be done as, there will be usually an actual in-person presentation, like something like an actual presentation, and with background information about food forests and how plants interact and why we do things a certain way. And then while we're planting, we use like sort of a lasagna gardening method, I guess, where we're planting, we start with a lawn and we're not removing the lawn or tilling or anything. We're just planting within that area, adding some amendments. And you saw cardboard in one of those pictures, kind of covering everything around that with cardboard, a layer of garden soil mix that we then are able to plant smaller plants into, or sometimes through the cardboard, and then also very thick layer of wood chips that is great mulch, so helping to keep the moisture in, but also keeping weeds down for that first year or two, and then breaking down to become part of the soil. And so those kind of things, we have definitely had experiences of people just taking that very basic information home and being, yeah, I can do a little area with some fruit trees and some native plants and not have to, dig up this great lawn area to do it. And also even at the weekly work bees, when new people come, I'll give them a little tour around the food forest and show them some of the plants and talk a little bit about that kind of stuff. If they're interested in that, knowing more from that point of view, I can give them a little bit of background information, and talk about the comfrey, like why that week we might be cutting down comfrey and chopping and dropping, and those kinds of things can be kind of integrated into those other volunteer experiences too. And then we also we used to do workshops where we would charge people, and we have this guy who's been growing fruit trees in Sudbury for over 40 years, Ron Lewis, and he's been giving these workshops, and so we would pay him to give workshops, but we would charge people just if they wanted to learn for their own yard. And then we started instead doing ones that were free, but they were free for volunteers. Like, we don't advertise them to the public. We offer them to people who are interested in getting involved in some of the food forest areas. And so, they can do a workshop with Ron of how to care for fruit trees. And then we have those other workshops that we do sometimes of different things like collecting native wildflower seeds, and people can take some home. And yeah, I hope that answers that.
No, that's great.
Thank you for that great answer, Carrie. Are there any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or put it in the chat box. No, we've got another thank you in the chat. I guess just one final question from me is, what are your next plans for the Delki Dozzi green space? I know you mentioned wanting to put a food forest in each of the kind of communities within Sudbury, but is there any kind of expansion plans for that original green space that you'd created?
I don't think until maybe after the 12, we have one in each ward, we might think about size-wise expanding, but I think because it's still a big effort to maintain that size of area. And we're managing it, but there was a couple of years where I was a bit concerned that the city might come after us and be like, like some people might start complaining that it didn't look good. And we don't, it's not manicured, but we try to just keep it looking tidy. And so size-wise, I don't think, no immediate plans to increase it. you know, we're always kind of improving the way we offer, you know, like different kinds of workshops that we offer, that like using some of the more exotic things we have growing there. We have sea buckthorn, which some people may be familiar with and others aren't, and it's an odd fruit, and but is actually quite a delicacy in chef circles, which I only found out recently because there's a chef that is from Sudbury but had lived in Montreal for a while and said this stuff is, you know, super expensive and it's this like gourmet thing, and so he's going to do a workshop this coming year on like using sea buckthorn, you know. So always looking for like new, smaller ideas like that, rather than thinking about expanding, just improving and doing more school group tours, like and field trips. We actually just recently got approved for a grant that will help us develop some more school programming. So.
Oh, wow, that's excellent. There is another question in the chat here asking if there are any similar groups in Renfrew County, if you're aware of any of those.
I don't know about any in Renfrew County. If you might try contacting Bonita Ford, because she's in Perth, which isn't that far from that general. I know she knows of an organization in Ottawa that had done something similar. She may know if there is something there, but I haven't heard of anything.
Great. Thank you for that. And it doesn't look like there are any other questions in the chats, but I will let everybody that's here know that the recording of this webinar will be available on Soul's website in a couple of days. So if you have any other questions, we'll also make sure to have Carrie's contact info and you can reach out. But yeah, thank you very much again, Carrie. That was a wonderful presentation. And just a heads up that we will have another webinar episode on April 11th. That's our next episode. So make sure to check out our website and you can register for the webinars there. But yes, huge thank you to Carrie. Thanks again for coming and sharing your knowledge today with Soul.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been really great. We love to spread the word about what we're doing. So thanks.
That's great. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Take care.